You ever hear about those old places that seem to hold on to something long after the people are gone? A kind of silence that doesn't feel quite right, where every creak of wood and whimper of the wind feels like it's trying to talk to you. Well, there's one such place, a derelict orphanage deep in the woods, known only to some as Greyfield. What happened to the children there, no one really knows. But their names and faces are whispers on the tongues of those daring enough to stand in the shadow of that skeletal building. This story will stay with you long after the lights turn out. Welcome to the Nightside Archive. Tonight's episode, The Hollow Children of Greyfield. You'll find Greyfield about 10 miles from the nearest town, hidden behind a wall of ancient gnarled oaks. Someone might have stumbled upon it if they went searching through the dense forest brush, though most only hear about it over whispered campfire tales. It has a look about it that unsettles you deep down. The shattered windows reflect a dull gray sky. The ivy stretches across the crumbled walls as if dragging the whole place back into the earth. In the late 1800s, this orphanage was supposed to be a safe haven, a place of warmth and comfort for the many local children who'd lost their parents to famine or illness. But the stories say otherwise. People in neighboring towns called it cursed. Strange reports began surfacing even in the early days. At night, the residents would hear children's voices singing eerie, disjointed lullabies. Not within the safety of the walls, but from the surrounding woods. Attempts to search for the unseen singers failed time and time again. The people claimed their lanterns flickered and died, leaving them stranded and paralyzed in the pressing darkness. Then there was the laughter, odd, unnatural laughter that sometimes came from empty rooms, places that resonated with an indescribable chill. Perhaps worse than the nightly sounds were the disappearances. Children taken in by the orphanage would sometimes simply vanish, every scrap and trace of their existence erased overnight. When caretakers were questioned, they would give chillingly vague responses as though they'd forgotten the missing entirely. The records disappeared too. Strange fogs would settle around the grounds on those nights, swallowing every clue, leaving those left behind with nothing but suspicion and dread. They say the final turning point came in 1912 on an unseasonably cold autumn night. The townsfolk had grown wary of the orphanage for decades and refrained from associating with it. But on that particular night, the building caught flame. The towering inferno licked through the sagging ceilings, consuming everything within. Strangely, no one claimed to have seen anyone leave. Not a single caretaker, no children fleeing to safety. Authorities combed through the ashes the following week, but no remains were found. It was as though everyone inside had simply evaporated. Time marched on, and Greyfield faded from people's minds, buried in folklore and kept at arm's length like a venomous snake. But not for everyone. Over the years, a few curious souls, historians, thrill-seekers, or paranormal investigators returned to the ruins. Without fail, they always talked about the whispers. Voices, faint but clear, sometimes calling names, sometimes humming unsettlingly off-key lullabies. Some recorded eerie phenomena. Photos with distorted faces or sudden black blurs filled memory cards. Camera gears refused to work, batteries draining instantly. One explorer, upon revisiting his film, swore he saw a child's face staring back at him from the shattered frame of a second-story window. There's something else they noticed, an unnatural coldness which never matched the season outside. They said it would grip their chest, curdling the air with a rotten, earthy smell. Some even claimed to feel small, invisible hands brushing against their arms or tugging at their clothing, as though pleading for attention. And then came the footprints. footprints that appeared impossibly in the thick layers of dust, tiny trails of bare feet wandering down empty halls, vanishing without explanation. One group left in a panic after witnessing this firsthand, vowing never to return. And the chimes. Yes, the chimes were perhaps the eeriest detail of all. For beneath the floorboards of the main hall lay the remnants of an old children's piano, too warped to make music anymore. But on certain nights, those who stood silently at the wreckage insisted they could hear it faintly, a slow, haunting melody that turned the blood to ice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, it was patient, deliberate, heavy with sorrow, the kind of sound you felt deep in your bones. Some believe whatever resides in Greyfield is not malicious but trapped, bound to the crumbled stone and rotting plaster by grief so profound it echoes through time itself. Others swear those children, the Hollow Children as they come to be known, are not innocent. They say you should never answer their calls if you hear your name carried through the trees, because that's how they lure you. Some even claim the reason no bodies were found in 1912 is because they weren't consumed by fire. The children themselves became something else entirely, something not meant to remain among the living. And here's the twist for those drawn to darkness. Anyone who tries to stay overnight and make direct contact. Well, let's just say some of those people are said to have disappeared too. No left-behind belongings, no signs of departure, only the hopeless accusation of empty beds or abandoned equipment. It leaves you wondering, do the Hollow Children simply seek companionship, or do they hunger for something else? So now the question falls to you. Would you step into the moldering remains of Greyfield? Would you kneel before the trunks of the trees that shroud the bone-white skeleton of its structure, calling back to whispers that churn the air like needles through fabric? And if you did, might you dare to listen for their faint voices, or follow the soft, disappearing giggles that tease the edge of audibility? Remember, some doors once opened cannot be closed, and Greyfield's legacy might be waiting for just one more soul to join its somber, eternal waltz.